Mr. King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do thank the witnesses, and Mr. Secretary, I appreciate your demeanor here. And a little about your background is interesting to me, that growing up in the country and having to make that adjustment, I think that was an interesting narrative. Can you just give me a few seconds on what the family farm or ranch operation was like? Did you have a family there, brothers and sisters also you grew up with, and you all had to be relocated to the city?
Congressman, I can. You know, I've always said that I grew up on a family farm, but I usually don't get the opportunity to explain the rest of the story. That family farm was not my family's farm. We were the labor on that farm. Now, I had relatives that owned farms nearby, but my dad was injured in an accident, a tractor accident on the farm, and we had to relocate to the city. And it's really, really tough, Congressman, when you grow up as a little kid. You run around barefooted all day long on the farm. You're around cattle. You're around all the different crops. To also move into a city where it's a strange world. So it was a major adjustment. That's why my dad understood that it was so different for me having come from the farm.
Do you have siblings also that?
And I do. But one thing that I wanted to emphasize to you, Congressman, and the committee, agriculture is so important to me. It didn't matter that we were the labor on the farm. It was so important to me because it gave me a work ethic. I remember being in town, and I was a big kid, pretty athletic. And I was on the football team and the basketball team, and I used to run the hurdles. And I remember all the city kids, they go lift weights, go hang out at the swimming pool. I go back to the farm and harvest onions all summer. Harvest chili peppers all
Secretary.
summer.
I appreciate that. I know that the chair has been lenient with the clock, or I probably would have focused this a little bit more. I just, as you talk about the tractor accident of your father, I just happen to think that as we sit here now, there's a funeral going on for one of my neighbors and friends who was killed in a tractor accident, and I regret I'm not able to be there today. Those things do happen on the farm. It's a dangerous place to work, and I'm interested in that background because it informs you in the job that you do, and I normally don't ask those kind of questions either. But I noticed that in both your testimony and that of Mr. Christian, the word fairness comes up over and over again. I mean, the effort in this GIPSA rule is to provide fairness. And so could you provide for this committee a definition of the word fairness?
Well, I didn't come prepared to give you a definition for fairness. But
if that's the motivator for this rule, that should be something that's pretty clear.
And I can give you my perspective, not an official definition, but my perspective is that in any type of transaction, there's two sides. And I just feel that fairness is where both sides are treated fairly.
Okay, but you grew up on a farm with parents and siblings and all of you working together. Did you ever hear any of them say, that's not fair? And that was...
Absolutely not. You're right. Absolutely.
And so does anyone that grew up in a family with 2 or more kids understand that there's no such thing as fair in a family like that?
Well, again, fairness from what perspective?
Well, and that's right, and that is my point. And this is being driven, I don't know if the President's involved, it's being driven by the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack. It's being driven by some interests out there that think they're not being treated fairly in contracts. And I've been involved in a lot of contracts over the years, and I've heard people use that word fair, but it never really got us to a resolution. I see it scattered throughout the legal language in this Congress. It's scattered throughout the code of the U.S. Code and through the states. And I will tell you, I can define the state fair. I can define a county fair, but I can't define fair. And if fair is our guideline here, it is in the perspective of whoever is advocating. And I'll say from this perspective that if you have someone who raises premium line of hogs and they go negotiate a contract to be paid that premium, and they're producing that high-quality product for a niche market, and the packer is anticipating that load a week or whatever it is that they've agreed to do coming in, and they get paid a premium on the other end, it's not fair to say to that producer and that packer that the government is going to intervene in that contract. Who can determine what's fair? Can government bureaucrats determine a contract it can determine if a contract's fair, or does it turn into the government deciding it's not fair that someone raises a premium product and the other person doesn't, and they don't get paid the same amount? It's about the equivalent of 4-H giving participation ribbons instead of blue and red ribbons instead. We've got to have competition in this marketplace. And my argument would be that if people think it's not fair, why don't they get in and compete with those? What keeps them out of that marketplace? If they believe they are locked out of the market, start your own packing plant, start your own business, open your own niche market, run the locker plant and expand it into a franchise, come to this Congress and ask us to allow them to sell meat across state lines so that people can actually penetrate into this marketplace. I think we're on the wrong path here. I think we're on a path that sets up the government to be setting prices in the terms of approving or disapproving of contracts. If the variance goes outside of the government's variance, then government has to approve the contract. And what are they doing intervening themselves in between a producer and a packer who have two consenting adults, have reached an agreement, and now the government says, well, it's not fair to somebody else? I can tell you that as a young man, I delivered hogs to the packing plant for a fellow that I worked for, and there might be a 300-pounder in there might be a 160-pounder in there, and a 220-pounder in there, in a pickup with a stock rack, waiting in line with pot trailers where every hog was uniform size and weight and easy for the packer to handle. Now, don't we know that even if I had one hog in that pickup truck that was the same profile, I'll call it, of all those hogs on that pot trailer, is that hog worth as much to the packer as the whole pack load, or the whole truckload? Those are the kind of things that the government is seeking to interject themselves into. And if we're going to be a free market economy, then we have to let the market settle this. And I don't think government can determine fairness any more than your father, whom I know that you respect and hold in high esteem and raised you, could broker that and have all of the siblings agree that he had come down in a fair decision. I don't want the government to be the nanny state. And I just give you an opportunity to respond to what I said, and then I'd yield to Chairman. I've abused my privilege here, but I'm sorry about that.
Mr. Congressman, I appreciate your comments. They're good comments. But by the same token, I can't get into the detail of the proposed rule. But I lost my train of thought. But anyway, those are good comments, and I appreciate this, and I've had similar conversations with producers throughout the country. But I just feel that we still need to let this process continue, because we have to respect all those comments that came in. And there's comments similar to the concerns that you just expressed and the comments you just made. And we're going to take those into consideration as we move forward. Now, I'm going to ask if my partner here, or Deputy Administrator Christian, would like to expand on this. Thank you.
Well, Congressman, I think, the issue that you've raised is the question that a lot of people have asked us as well. The Packers and Stockyards Act has included the word unfair practices, since the beginning, and a lot of people have asked, what does that mean? And so I think one of the things that you saw in this proposed rule was to try to provide some clarity as to what an unfair practice is, to help provide that guidance, to the marketplace as to determine, okay, what is unfair and what is not. So that was part of the intent of the proposed rule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.